Picture a small child running through a heavy downpour, laughing, with their eyes squeezed shut. They have no idea that just a few feet ahead of them, the ground drops away into a sheer cliff. Now, this isn't just some dramatic image. According to our source material, it's a perfect mirror for where humanity stands right now, with a risk so huge we can barely comprehend it. And that powerful image, it isn't just a story. It represents our blind sprint towards a potential catastrophe, one that involves 33 nuclear reactors sitting in one of the most earthquake-prone regions on the entire planet. In this explainer, we're not here to just spread fear. We're here to open our eyes and understand the warning signs. So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the ancient warnings that seem to have pointed to this for centuries. Then, we're going to get very real, grounding those prophecies in a chilling scientific simulation. We'll explore what this could mean for our planet's largest ocean, and, this is the important part, we'll talk about what can actually be done. Because in the end, we have a choice to make. Our journey starts way back in history. You see, the idea of a massive cataclysm coming from the east, well, it's surprisingly not new. Across different centuries, different cultures, various seers have described an event that sounds remarkably and terrifyingly similar. Now, when you read that through a modern lens, it's just eerie. We're talking about Nostradamus, writing way back in the 16th century. He talks about a great trembling from the land where the sun rises, which is almost universally interpreted as Japan. And that phrase, poisoned waters circling the globe, well, in the nuclear age, that takes on a terrifyingly precise meaning, doesn't it? And this wasn't just a one-off thing. In 1934, the famous psychic Edgar Cayce described a future map where most of Japan had actually vanished into the ocean. Even more recently, a prophet named Juscelino reportedly warned the Japanese government about the 2011 earthquake with incredible accuracy. The source material here isn't presenting these as simple coincidences, but as a clear pattern of warnings, getting louder and louder over time. All right, now we're going to shift gears. We're moving from prophecy to pure physics. And the tone here gets a lot colder, much more analytical, as we look at the raw mechanics of what this kind of disaster would actually entail. 33. Let that number just sink in for a moment. This single number is the modern scientific core of those ancient warnings. According to the source, the true unimaginable horror of a massive tectonic event in Japan isn't just the earthquake itself, or even the tsunami. It's the simultaneous cascading failure of 33 coastal nuclear reactors, all at once. What happens next is a terrifying, unstoppable chain reaction. A massive quake knocks out all power, so the cooling systems fail. Within just a few hours, the water boils away, and the nuclear fuel rods are exposed. The temperature skyrockets, creating a reaction that produces explosive hydrogen gas. And then, finally, the core itself melts, breaching every single layer of containment. Now, multiply that entire process by 33. Let's be absolutely clear about what that means. This isn't a disaster you manage. It's not an accident you contain. The models show that even just 5 simultaneous meltdowns would completely overwhelm any country's ability to respond. 33? Well, that's an anarchic catastrophe. It's a scenario that is, by every mathematical and logistical measure, beyond any human ability to control. Period. So, if an event like this were to actually happen, where would all the radioactive fallout from 33 uncontained nuclear meltdowns go? The answer is brutally simple, and it leads us right into our next section, the Black Ocean. The breach of 33 reactors would unleash an absolute torrent of radioactive poisons directly into the Pacific Ocean. You've got things like cesium-137 and strontium-90, which hang around for decades, tritium for over a decade. But there's one on this list that's in a whole other league of terror, and that's plutonium-239. 24,000 years. That is the half-life of plutonium-239. We need to be really clear about this. This isn't a problem for our children or our grandchildren. It's a legacy of poison that will last for hundreds of human generations. It would fundamentally and permanently alter our planet. The release of this kind of long-lasting radiation on this scale leads to a question that's as stark as it is terrifying. Could the Pacific Ocean, the very cradle of so much life on Earth, become permanently off-limits to humankind? Let's just spell out what forbidden really means here. It means no more seafood, because the entire marine food chain would be toxic. No more family vacations to the beach. Maritime trade would become a deadly radiological hazard. Living anywhere near the coast could become a death sentence. Even desalination, turning seawater into fresh drinking water. Impossible. The ocean would go from being a source of life to a giant, lethal, no-entry zone. Okay, this is horrifying information, I get it. But the whole point of a warning isn't to paralyze us with fear. It's to spur us into action. So in this section, we're shifting gears from the problem to the solution. The tone here needs to be firm, because these are things we can and absolutely must consider. And this brings us to what might be the most crucial idea in this entire explainer. The source argues that these prophecies, they are not a script for an unavoidable destiny we just have to accept. They are a warning sign, a message from a potential future that gives us the chance to slam on the brakes and change course. The story isn't written yet. So what can you do? On a personal level, it starts with basic preparedness. We're talking about having emergency food and water, getting a Geiger counter to detect a threat you can't see or smell, and having potassium iodide tablets on hand to protect your thyroid. And most importantly, having a rock-solid evacuation and communication plan for your family. But let's be real, individual action is just the first step. This is a global threat, and it demands a global response. It means we have to bolster our ocean radiation monitoring systems. We have to start diversifying our global food sources away from the Pacific. It means creating international rapid response teams for nuclear disasters. And maybe most critically, we have to accelerate the transition to safer, renewable energy. And all of this leads us to our final section. The prophecies have been heard, the science has been simulated, and now we are left with a choice. Humanity is standing at a crossroads, with the full power to avert the very disaster we've been warned about for centuries. And we come back to that child, running blindly in the rain. We lit the fires of nuclear power on the most unstable ground on Earth. After Fukushima in 2011, which was a massive warning shot, what did we do? Instead of stopping, we ran faster, putting our energy needs ahead of existential risks. We can now choose to stop running. We can choose to finally open our eyes. You know, this makes you wonder, what if we've been misinterpreting these ancient warnings this whole time? What if seas turning to blood wasn't some supernatural vision, but just an ancient, metaphorical way to describe an ocean so contaminated it would trigger every red alert we have? What if the biblical wormwood, a star that fell and made the waters bitter and deadly, was a pre-scientific way of talking about tasteless, odorless, but lethal radioactive isotopes? So this is it. This is an urgent call to action, and it's aimed at everyone. To our brilliant scientists and engineers, we need new technologies for dealing with multiple reactor emergencies. To our world leaders, mandatory, transparent, seismic audits for these plants are not negotiable. And to citizens everywhere, it's on us to pressure our governments to put nuclear safety above politics and profit. Because if we fail to act, what is our legacy? Just imagine future generations standing on the shores of a dead, blackened ocean. They'll know we were warned. The records will exist, and they will ask a simple, devastating question. Why? Why didn't you do something when you still had the chance? And so we end right back where we began, with a choice. The sources are clear on this. These prophecies, this data, it's all a warning, not a fixed destiny. It is a final, blaring alarm bell trying to wake us up. The only question left is, will we finally stop running and open our eyes?